We would now commence with our panel discussion, and I would request Mr. Shomo Shah, Assistant Professor with the Department of Political Science, to conduct the panel discussion.
A very good afternoon to all of you. We welcome you all to today's panel discussion on the topic of majoritarianism and public psyche. We welcome our Vice Chancellor, Honorable Vice Chancellor, for being present today. It's a very big honor for us. And we honor all our guests for getting the time from their busy schedule and coming to our university for this panel discussion. So without spending any more time, I'll directly move on to the various issues that we are going to discuss about today. Beginning with a major question on the film itself, the film of Ganashatru that we watched just a few moments before. So, and any of the panelists, I would rather request all the panelists to answer on this question. The first one is that the film Ganashatru revolves around a continuous conflict between what appears to be a difficult truth and a convenient lie. We have observed this in reality on multiple occasions where people follow the pleasant lie as long as it supports their majoritarian biases. I'd request the panelists to provide their opinion about this major phenomenon. Sir, if you may start.
Okay, thank you. Am I audible at the back? So, one thing you must understand that the context of the film itself, if you look at when Ray was making the film, it was 88, 89 the film was released. And the context was basically the Ram Janmabhoomi movement. So at that time you have the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, which was popularized by the Sangh Parivar. And the movement's sole agenda was to establish a myth that Ram was actually born in Ayodhya, and particularly at that particular spot where Babri Masjid, which was built by Babur after 1526. So that particular spot was the birthplace of Ram. So this is itself is a kind of a myth. But then the majoritarian bias is that because of hundreds of years of you have a myth which is going on, that a lot of people actually believe in that kind of myth. But that's not a scientific fact, or that's not the truth, because as we know that the character of Rama itself is a mythological character. It's not a historical person in that sense. So where the scientific understanding of history is somehow getting confused with a kind of a mythological belief. And this is happening even today in the context, like you have several kinds of myths regarding minorities. So you have a very, very far right myth which is going on that the Muslim population explosion, which is the Muslims will take over India because they marry 4 times and they have higher birth rate than the Hindu birth rate, which is absolutely incorrect, because let's say if you compare with the Muslim birth rate of the southern India, that's much lower. The fertility rate is much lower than, let's say, the Hindu males in the north. So, so one thing you have to understand that this film deals with the superstitious beliefs and myths, and at the same time how science actually challenges that. But that has a context in which Ray makes this film. So yeah, I think.
I'd request the other panelists to also respond.
Would you kindly repeat the question?
Absolutely, sir.
A bit louder, please. Huh?
Okay, sir. So the question is basically that the film Ganashatru revolves around a continuous conflict between what appears to be a difficult truth and a convenient lie. We have observed this reality on multiple occasions where people follow the pleasant lie as long as it supports their majoritarian biases. I'd request the panelists and you here to respond on this.
Thank you, and before I start, I wish to thank the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Sister Nivedita University and the 3 departments that are organizing this seminar, Psychology, Sociology and Political Science, all the faculty members of these 3 departments, my heartfelt gratitude for having me here in this seminar as a speaker. Now to answer your question, Shomo. Now, frankly, I am at a loss. Why I am at a loss? Because, you know, what is majoritarianism? I'm still, I'm a bit baffled. What is majoritarian? I'll come to Ganashatru very soon. Now, in the name of majoritarianism, you know, everywhere a minority is dominating. You know, this minority is, I would say, a very tiny minority. Look at our democracies. Everywhere, you know, the majority, the simple majority, that is the, if you think of the voting system, the simple majority wins. Now, if it is 50.5%, you are in the government. But if it is 49.5%, you are in the opposition. So the point is, after being elected, after forming the government, actually 3 or 4%, they decide everything. Now in our student days, probably Dr. Islam's student days, we heard about kitchen cabinet. The kitchen cabinet having important ministers and all that. Now it is not even the kitchen cabinet. Now it is 1 or 2, even maximum 3 or 4. They are dominating everywhere, as we have seen in Ganashatru. The reality you are talking about, you know, a very popular doctor, he was branded an enemy by, again, if you call it, by a majority. So this is majoritarianism, I would say, in a very perverted sense. You know, because it is sometimes called ochlocracy. Because a mob psychology, a mob. So why I am baffled? On the one side, there is a tiny minority. They are ruling everywhere, whether it is USA, whether it is India, whether it is Australia, everywhere. And on the other side, there is the mob. The mob psyche is dominating everywhere, as we have seen in Ganashatru. Lynching, mob lynching, you know, I would say a suppression of minorities in every sphere, religious minorities, linguistic minorities, everywhere. So on the one hand, we see a mob culture, a mob rule, and that is in the public domain. And in the government domain, we see, in the name of majoritarianism, we see a very tiny minority, they are ruling. So that makes me really, really baffled. And probably Satyajit Ray tried to picture this in Ganashatru. And well, this is the reality to me. We are really, in the name of majoritarianism, we are having a rule of maximum 2 or 3. That is the reality.
If Madam Gormakar could add her opinion on this.
A very good afternoon to one and all present here. I guess I'm audible to all of you. Okay. So first of all, I would like to seek the blessings of Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, Pro Vice Chancellor Sir, Chancellor Sir, and Registrar Sir, and Dean of Science Madam, and all the learned faculty members, HOIs, HODs, and on of the dais dignitaries, and the moderator sir as well. Yes, first of all, this particular movie rightly mentioned that it is actually a conflict between a convenient lie and something, the truth that actually Dr. Gupta, played by Soumitra Chatterjee, he wanted to establish. So what I have found in this movie, and it was rightly portrayed in this movie, that initially what was shown in this movie, that Dr. Gupta wanted to express his anxiety regarding that most of his patient reported some waterborne diseases very recently, and he was very anxious, and he wanted to convey these things and create an awareness via that local newspaper. Initially, it was accepted by that local newspaper, Jaunavarta, the editor. Now, when this, like here, the concept of majoritarianism comes into this play, when this, the very powerful people comes into this particular situation, like this, this fellow, Dr. Gupta's youngest brother, Mr. Nishit, played by Pritiman. So, and then what I have seen, that this concept of majoritarianism, as already the eminent panelists, they have already mentioned that the decisions taken by, and also our Honorable Vice Chancellor sir already mentioned that decisions taken by the majority, and that is without even thinking of this minorities' side or their concern, right? So here in this particular movie, when this power, here this majority was portrayed mainly on the basis of the power people having this positional power in the society. Because Mr. Nishit, he was this, the municipal chairman. So here, when people initially accepted and wanted to create awareness among people, among the localites, regarding this, the problem that they are facing, and Dr. Gupta wanted to save them. But then when power comes into the picture, that comes into this particular situation, people started being, the people opinion being started molded by that power, okay, and they started accepting the truth, so-called that the not even truth here, I must say that the convenient lie which was being which was being portrayed, or which was being spread by this powerful people, few powerful people there in the society. So here in our our field, psychology, and any other social science field, we have the concept of this conformity, right? So when we do conform to the those people who are there in the powerful, and powerful people, and we do conform because we don't want to be isolated somewhere, isolated, or not want to be, somehow we don't want to feel ourselves that we will be deprived of something. So at the end, what was just before this end of this movie, what was shown in this movie, that Dr. Gupta was being portrayed, or he was, the way his, initiative was kind of, it was showed in the eyes of others that Dr. Gupta has become an enemy of the people, right? So this, and he was completely shattered. He lost his job, and even, which was very striking to me, in this movie, at the end, that his landlord, because they used to stay in a rented house, Dr. Gupta and his family, his landlord even came to him and said that, Dr. Gupta, I'm grateful to you because you saved my daughter's life, but still, like people are saying that, saying something against you, so I'm requesting you to, vacate this house very soon. So that was very surprising. Again, majoritarianism. Here, majoritarianism, I'm trying to establish this point that it is not only the majority of people, sometimes people who are holding certain positional power in the society. But in this movie, the best part, which was portrayed at the end, when Dr. Gupta was shattered completely, he and his family shattered completely, and even he lost his job, that job of that hospital, as well as his daughter also lost her job. Then at the end, maybe educated people, truly educated people, because education, the definition of education is very difficult, Is it only a formal degree or is it our awareness? That is something which is very important to say. So when this truly educated people, the people there in the theatre troupe of Dr. Gupta's son-in-law, they understood that it actually what he wanted to establish, which is the fact, and it will help to people to survive and save this all the localites. So then they started protesting against this Mr. Nishchit and his powerful people, so-called majoritarianism. And then at the end it was shown there was a little ray of hope that yes, somehow, some point of time, even there are many people, majoritarianism so-called, they wanted to prove us wrong. Somehow honesty wins. So this is what my understanding from this particular movie, from beginning to end. That's it from my end.
That was a very nice answer, madam. Now, on the question of the aspect of powerful people, one of the segments of those powerful people was, of course, the media. Because it was a daily of that particular town, Chondipur, which ran the narrative of the municipality that actually there is nothing wrong with the temple's water. So on that regard, I'd be asking a question to Professor Islam, that the film showcases the impact of the media on public psyche or opinion. In this vein, do you consider media as an enabler of majoritarian politics? And if that's the case, how so?
Yeah, before coming, I have a very direct answer to your question, but before coming to your question absolutely directly, you have to also understand the parallels between Henry Gibson's play in the 19th century and how it was adapted a little over 100 years later by Ray here. So just like in the play where all the characters have been very beautifully adapted here, you need to understand what Ibsen was actually criticizing at that time, and media question will come here. So he was not only criticizing the conservative sections of his own time and own people, but he's also to some extent criticizing the so-called the liberalism of his time. Because if you look at the media, then the media was the liberal face, which initially, and in fact you see the name here, Janobarta, which is like people's message, if you translate it roughly from Bengali to English, then the Janobarta editor was absolutely accepting the fact of the matter, that what's going on inside. And also from the point of view of a scientific inquiry, if you understand how Ashok Gupta was actually carrying the investigation, because he was not relying on his own assumptions, because he was initially in the earlier part of the film, if you look at carefully, then he's basically suggesting that I can't precisely say from what is the exact reason of these diseases, but empirically I can see that a lot of patients are coming with these waterborne diseases. So until and unless the scientific evidence that comes from the lab pathological test from Kolkata that arrives at his place, he is not going to comment on that, right? Now, here the media is completely in cahoot or completely in alliance with the political maneuvering, with the political master here. So you are the chairman, the municipality chairman, which is Nishit Gupta, his younger brother, as well as the local business interests. So where you have this Bhargava who has a rice mill, and he is quite interesting, and Ray actually authentically portrays the Bengal Mufassil character, even the Bengal state character, in a way that you don't have a Bengali capital there, you have a non-Bengali capital, which is absolutely true even today. dominated the Bengal's regional capital is largely dominated by the non-Bengalis. But at the same time, Bhargava's interest in making Chandipur as a tourist spot, because that also earns him revenue and people are interested in. Nishit has a stake also in Mandir. And how the media is getting pressurized from both the business interests as well as the political masters. So here the liberal mask of the media is completely unmasked, by the very act of not publishing the article based on scientific evidence. So in a way, it's actually the media in a progress has a progressive mask, but that's a garb. That's the kind of in the garb of it. It actually has very vested interest, and which is serving the vested interest of the society. Now, if you look at the context when Ray was making the film, and now, then I think the context has changed a lot. During the time when Ray was making the film, the media was largely being owned by the public sector. So you have Doordarshan or the state television, which was largely the media outlet in terms of television. You have the All India Radio and all. You have a little private newspapers, but as far as television is concerned, it was largely state-owned. But today, particularly after liberalization with the 90s and the 2000s, you have several private news channels which is now getting, it's proliferating. It's quite a growing industry. And here, if not the majority, but at least a significant sections of the media in India today are somehow, complicit, if not a proper enabler of a certain kind of social myths or this kind of superstitious beliefs, but they are complicit of majoritarianism. And over and above, particularly after 2010s and all, you have social media, which is again another kind of an enabler for mob lynching. In the last few years, the social media with fake news and fake campaigns. And in the last, particularly from 2014, there has been 79 incidents where 83% of the victims were largely Muslim minorities. And this is basically based on social media fake campaigns. So social media, more than the regular media of television and print, is more of an enabler of a lot of communal kind of flare-ups and a lot of communal riots. Recently, if you look at Haryana's Noo, then you can see that in Manipur also this is something which is happening. Before also, somebody like in Tripta Tyagi's kind of this whole telling a student in Muzaffarnagar in UP to slap his fellow friend in the class. But that's absolutely shocking, right? So these are getting viral in the social media. So the hate campaigns and the hate speeches are getting viral in the social media. So I will say the social media is more of an enabler. The media is complicit. And today, when big corporate capital, which is very much aligned with a majoritarian government, is now buying several media outlets. The NDTV was a major kind of, it was also a private company, but it was the editorial position changed after the after buying by a corporate capital, which is close to the majoritarian government at the center today. So I think this is something which you need to understand, that the context has changed from the public sector to the private sector media, public sector television to the private sector, and the emergence of social media, that actually creates a condition for enabling a situation for several kinds of communal flare-ups.
So in that regard, I also think that unlike Ibsen's time when the media was regarded and it played, even if just as a garb, the role of a liberal entity. Now the media, it does not even portray itself like that. It openly expresses itself as being complicit with the majoritarian government.
Yeah, that's true. But this is also interesting, where even in what you call the TRP, and that's where you have these particular markings of the TRP. The earlier avatar of the TRP is coming in the film itself, where Horidas who is the editor of the Janabarta, is skeptical to publish the article by Dr. Ashok Gupta after receiving 17 letters from the general public, and he is basically calculating that his small newspaper in a Mufassir town will, once the article gets published, then the readership will cut down to 25%, which is 1/4 of the current readership. And the publisher and printer, which is a very, very interesting, Manoj Mitra's, who is a very interesting character there, who actually is a mild conservative in a way that he's basically more interested in the balancing act. He's skeptical to take a radical position, certainly not. He doesn't like that any radical position. যাকে বলে মাত্রা ছাড়িয়ে যাওয়ার যে পুরো ব্যাপারটা that he was basically suggesting. So I guess this is also an interesting thing, that where the editorial line of the media will be, this is guided by a lot of public opinion. But at the same time, what Ashok Gupta is suggesting to the particular editor, that it is not only how public responds to the media, but it is also the responsibility of the media outlet to propagate a very genuine message to the public. That the deputy editor is also suggesting that if we would have published it, we would have supported a very pure person, a correct person. It would have actually earned a lot of respect for our newspaper. But at the same time, it is also the role of the media to actually, make the public aware and make it conscious. In other words, the basic liberal promise of making the society aware of its own conditions and support the scientific evidence and scientific truth. I think that is something, a very, very strong message was there in the film. But then of course it gets compromised because of vested interests playing, and how it affects the entire media outlet and how it responds to that particular event. Yeah.
Thank you for your brilliant response, sir. I'd request somebody to just close the projector. Just close the projector. প্রজেক্টরটা বন্ধ করে দিন। Thank you. Moving away from the media, I'd like to ask Professor Chatterjee about something larger. In recent years, we have observed the rise of majoritarian politics at a global scale. According to your opinion, what explains this phenomenon, that since the crisis in the Eurozone, we have seen that there has been a rise of populist leaders, right-wing populist leaders across countries in Europe like Hungary, Austria, also UK, that ultimately led to the Brexit, and then also in USA in the form of Donald Trump. So what explains this fact that populism and majoritarian populism has been so acceptable at a global scale?
Populism is everywhere. And majoritarian populism, I think that the more and more we will face economic crisis, this sort of populism will grow. You have referred to Eurozone, and in different other areas of the globe, we are having an economic crisis. Now, when, say, the populist leaders, they won't be able to provide jobs, employment, even, food, basic shelter, when they fail to provide these things to the people, what they will resort to some kind of populism in order to make people forget the basic demands. That is happening everywhere. So I would link it to economic problems, this sort of populism. And there is always everywhere the vote politics, the politics of vote, the politics of elections, whatever you call it. So, in that sense, this kind of populism is everywhere in a global scale. I have seen, with my own eyes, how people go frenzy in American elections. I have been witness to one, such election in one American university. So all over the world, this is happening. The point is, at one point of time, John Stuart Mill, he talked about elitism. The elites being in the government, people with good merit, people with quality, they would rule. But we in a democracy, we did not accept that premise, we rejected that. But the democracy that we are witnessing today, everywhere, I would say some more intelligent people or shrewd people, they have manipulated our democracies in a way that populism is kind of an opium for everybody. You forget about your food, you forget about your shelter, you forget about your jobs, and you go on with some kind of frenzy, some kind of populist. That is why I talked about mob lynching. I talked about the minorities being sidelined everywhere, and it is happening not only in South Asia, not only in this part of the world, it is probably happening everywhere. So I would say this is some kind of a, if I may use that word, some kind of a failure of our democratic system. We have to, but there is no other way. That is one big problem. We could not devise any other system better than democracy. But at the same time, democracy has been manipulated in a way where populism grew, but the basic needs of the people, they remained unfulfilled. So that is why it is, I believe, and a populism pays, pays for the politicians. Populism pays probably for the media people, TRP. Dr. Moidul Islam referred to TRP and everything. So some kind of populism is there, but I would say that it is, again, I would say a failure of our democratic system. We have to think anew. We have to think whether our democracy is properly working or not. Because, this kind of populism sometimes suppresses the basic demand of people. Populism is anti-people sometimes. That is the anathema. That is the problem. That is where I feel baffled. Populism is becoming anti-people. Populism is becoming anti-poor. So I don't know when this populism will end, whether it will subside, because everywhere we are witnessing this sort of populism.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, Professor Islam.
Can I add to this?
Absolutely, sir.
And I think you have to understand this whole global surge of majoritarianism again in a very historical context. If you look at the post-1945 consensus on the welfare state, so roughly from 1945 to mid-1970, so like 30 years of welfare state in the West, particularly in the Europe, and in the New Deal of the United States. Then the state was playing a major role in health sector, education sector. The state was giving unemployment wages. The state was managing public sector, so the wage rate was quite high for the white working class. So these were there, but at the same time, in these particular 30 years, particularly these 30, 40 years, cheap labor from Afro-Asian and Latin American countries, they were in high demand in the West, right? Because who will be the gardener? Who will be the restaurant waiter? Who will be your nanny? Or who will be your sweeper? So a lot of this cheap labor was coming from the third world to the West. And it actually created a condition from what you call the multicultural societies, right? So there was a kind of a consensus that, okay, we need cheap labor, and the white working class is not going to do this work because their wage rate is quite high. So we need cheap labor to do the odd jobs, and you need this cheap labor from third world, and they were there. Now, it actually interesting, it actually puts those societies into a much more multiracial societies that they were ever, right, in their own history. Now, how liberalism is going to accommodate this particular kind of new segments of populations coming from very different parts of the world in their own territory. It is going to accommodate them on the basis of some kind of democratic rights, minority rights, some idea of difference, identity, that kind of questions. But the crisis actually started from the mid-1970s, particularly after post-1973 oil petrodollar shock. And the start of the initial phase of the globalization, liberalization, and privatization policies in the West. In India, it actually came late from the 80s, but it already started in the West. So the Reagan-Thatcherite regime, both in the US and as well as UK, actually sealed the proper deal in favor of the neoliberal thing. Now, this particular neoliberal regime was again from the mid-1970s to, let's say, 90s onwards, and to even to the 2000s, the 30 years of welfare states followed by another 30 years of neoliberal regime. By the time of early 2000s, the welfare state is completely collapsed. When we were students in England in 2010, once the Cameron government came, the student fees were quite high. There was anti-hike fee movement there. In 2011, the London riots happened, again based on kind of race relations and all. But this is coming out of the insecurity of this white working class who has now lost their jobs because of the neoliberal regime, because of the retreat of the state, and the private sector has now come up. The artificial intelligence, AI, is also now taking up jobs for the white working class. And now you have a context where you have a multiracial society because of the earlier generations of migrations that took place, right? Now, what the right-wing populist, now you have two responses, particularly in the context of this particular conundrum. And after the 2007-8 financial crisis, this crisis actually was quite growing. So the 2007-8 crisis was responded with two kinds of movements. One was a little bit of left and left of center kind of movement, which initially gave rise to, let's say, Piqueteros in Argentina, or the Podemos in Indignados in Spain, which from where the Podemos party in Spain came out. You have the Arab Spring in the Middle East, and you have the Occupy Wall Street movement in the US. But soon, these global movements, which is largely of a left-wing populist kind of a movements, were soon petered out. It soon actually, it soon got evaporated. This is precisely because the logic of these movements where the logic of autonomy was there. So you have several spontaneous movements. You have, spontaneity in these movements, but then you have a lack of hegemony in these movements. So they didn't have a proper alternative economic agenda around which several other democratic struggles could have been weaved together to have a united struggle against both capital and state. That didn't happen. Now, as a result, when the left-wing populists actually failed, the right-wing populists emerged. And the classic, the final failure came with the Eurozone, with the Greek Eurozone crisis, where the Syriza was able to form the government, but the Syriza could not actually do the radical step of coming out of the euro. So the Syriza was succumbing to the demands of the European Central Bank and largely to the neoliberal orthodoxy. So the same anti-austerity protests that the Indignados in Latin America, or the Piqueteros in Latin America, the Indignados in Europe, or the Occupy Wall Street actually was expressing, the Syriza actually precisely gave in to those kind of austerity measures. Now, as a result, what happened, you have this crisis of the white working class was fanned up, that these immigrants and their future generations are taking our jobs. You see, because now you live in a society where, now at the same time you have globalization, so you have a globalization of labor which is there. So now you have cheap IT sector company managers or some other, not only flight of capital, but I'm just flight of labor from third world is also going there, because if you compare to, let's say, a certain skilled labor that you need, where you can't have the skilled labor from the white metropolitan centers. So this campaign got some kind of justification, legitimacy. At the same time, what you're saying, the flight of capital from the metropolitan centers to, let's say, in China or in India, that's happening. And that's why Trump comes to the picture that, he needs more investments there, and his economic policies will be like that. No, what I'm suggesting is that a right-wing populism with neo-fascist trends will only emerge at a time when there will be a crisis not only within capitalism, but also a crisis at the ideological pole of both the left as well as the liberals. When Hitler's fascism emerged, precisely during that particular context in the 1930s and early 40s, in the context when both the left and the liberal, these two ideological poles were itself in crisis in Germany. And this is what is happening today. The left couldn't give a response, although there was initial spontaneous, movements like the movements that I told. And the liberals also can't understand how to negotiate with this particular context, this particular situation. And so they follow the neoliberal orthodoxy. And in between these two, you have a right-wing populists who are gaining ground. And somebody like Viktor Orban in Hungary, he is actually more sophisticated than, let's say, Putin and all. Putin and all is absolutely neo-fascist, I will say. And I think this is not only the right majoritarian government, it's also the global autocracy which is emerging. So Erdogan in Turkey, Modi in India, Putin in Russia, Xi Jinping in China. So it's a series of majoritarian, autocratic kind of governments which is emerging. Because you look at how China actually responds to its Uyghur Muslims in the Western China. So I think this is an interesting kind of segment in the global scale of the rise of majoritarianism and the rise of right-wing populism with a lot of authoritarian kind of tendencies. And Viktor Orban, something like Europe, he's more sophisticated. He's actually read a lot of postmodernism and all, and he will critique this whole multiculturalism and from his own theoretical positions. So I think this is an interesting stuff that which we are looking at the global juncture. And so you have to understand that particular context and this whole how populism actually emerged precisely because of the crisis of the welfare state and the crisis of the left as well as the liberals, both in the South Asia as well as, let's say, in Europe and the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So basically, Professor Chatterjee and Professor Islam, according to both of them, it's largely the failure of the liberal ideology, the liberalism, and combined with economic austerity and various kinds of economic struggles caused by liberalization, privatization, and globalization. However, this is largely a political standpoint. But the fact that majoritarian populism has been so acceptable across various diverse population groups, and this question is to Professor Kormokar, is there something fundamental to the human psyche that because of which one is so easily embroiled into populist majoritarian politics, so easily accepting of populist majoritarian politics? Is there something fundamental to human psyche that motivates it?
Okay, well, first of all, before I answer this question, sir, if I can just throw some light from a psychological perspective of the first question. First question, which was not common to all of us, but then regarding this media. So with your permission, sir, if I can, So if for the media perspective, I mean, what we already have heard, our eminent speakers over here, what in this movie, because I'm trying to highlight from the psychological perspective and trying to connect it to the movie as well. So what I have seen that the concept of majoritarianism, it impacted not as not the media as a whole, but the human psyche. Sir, third question also related to this, right? So, where we know, like we have seen in this movie that this majoritarianism, initially when it was accepted that the true, actually the, Dr. Gupta's, that awareness campaign was accepted by this editor of that local newspaper. He was about to publish it, and he was pretty much confident that yes, we have to publish it and it will help the people. But then he was being pressurized by this, this powerful people in the society. He was being pressurized. Maybe this, the role played by Mr. Manoj Mitra, the printing, that particular, yeah. So both of them were pressurized, and they tried to mold the people who are easily being molded by this powerful people, their concept or their, what should I say, their thought processes. But it is all about human psyche, and there is a concept in psychology that we have, the concept of devil's advocate, and which was played by Mr. Shubhendu there in this movie, the assistant editor. Okay, he was not being molded. Even he had a less power in this in his office. He requested several times because he understood that Dr. Gupta wanted to save mankind, means the localites, by spreading this news, but he was not molded by this, people who are holding position in this movie. And what he did, it was, praiseworthy, and playing the role of a devil's advocate. He left his job, and he then, the script, he had sent that script to the top newspapers of Kolkata. And then he came to, in spite of knowing that almost majority of people going against Dr. Gupta and his family, and they have already tried to, make him villain, the enemy of the people, he came to his house, and then he and Dr. Gupta's family got the support, as I said earlier as well, from those people who are actually educated, and they, all of them play the role of devil's advocate in the movie. So it is about human psyche. So if you want to play the role of a devil's advocate, think differently. Try to think of those perspectives who are non-conformist, right? So this is very important. And also, sir's third question, to answer this, that majoritarianism impacted human psyche, because as in this movie, again and again, we are trying to emphasizing on the power as well. We have a tendency to abide by the things without thinking what would be the consequence of our obedience. This is also a social influence we have, right? So this very interesting series of experiments we have in psychology, that is Stanley Milgram's experiments of obedience, where people are abiding by the obedience authority, knowing that the person who is getting the punishment will be in trouble in the long run, or maybe it's going to be fatal. But even I'm, because I am abiding by those people, because I don't want to go against the flow kind of thing. So why should I go against it, and why do I need to play the roles of devil's advocate? What will happen with me? That is the very important thing. So these are the two things which we have in psychology. Not only two things, mainly the social influence. It is very important, and the discussion will not tell you that you will not be influenced by the societal phenomena or any kind of societal instructions from the society, or maybe instructions from the authority. What we are trying to say that try to play the role of non-conformist sometimes, thinking of different, like thinking of the pros and cons of the situation. So when I think that, like the consequence of what I am abiding by, or what I am, abiding by without asking any question, the consequence would be wrong. So it's better to think differently. And it is also the role of our, the leaders or the people who are in the authority, holding this authority position. It is their responsibility as well not to impose so many things on those people, because like when people are there in the authority positions, if they are imposing certain things, people who are the followers, they have a tendency to abide by. Right, so not to impose so many things, divide the groups, like into different small groups, asking for their opinion. Now, come to a consensus, and also try to give some, room for those people who want to say something different. Maybe we don't like it first time, but then try to give them certain room for that. That is important. And this particular movie reminds me a very famous folk tale, that is The Emperor's New Clothes, right? So it was actually translated into 100 different languages, and there is one translated in Bengali, a poem written by Nirendranath Bhattacharya, Ulungo Raja. Yes. So that was that. Again, that the small child, that he plays the role of a devil's advocate. Otherwise, people are seeing that that the emperor is not wearing any clothes, but they are somehow not having enough courage to come up with these things. That where is your cloth? You are saying so many things, but where is your cloth? So this is something and like when the child, he said that, okay, where is, the emperor, the king is not wearing anything. Then what do you think? What would be the reaction of people? Oh my God, I actually was seeing what I must have said earlier. The little child doesn't have any, very little social influence, right? He came up with the truth, but I could not see. Actually, I'm a fool then. So this is what I would like to say here, that we need to be very, very careful. Social influence would be there, but we need to be very, very careful. It should not be, causing some harm to the society. It is our responsibility, all of our responsibility to do that. So that's it from my end, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, sir, if you may respond.
Can I add to this? Because when you talk about majoritarianism, I think how the people is getting constructed, and even here both in the Henrik Ibsen's play as well as in Ganashatru, when Ashok Gupta is suggesting that when my interview will go to the Calcutta newspaper, the headline should be Confessions of an Enemy of the People, right? Now, how this people is being constructed, that's precisely what the task of the populace is. What they will do is that they will actually construct an authentic people out of the larger population. So an authentic people is carved out from the total population. So in the case of Trump, anyone who is a Latino or who is a black or who are Muslims are actually part of the authentic community of people. And this is precisely what the white supremacist right-wing populace in Europe is all about. And in India, this is a construction where if you are Muslim, then you are not a part of the authentic people, because You are the other because now the Indian people, you know, as you know, solemn, you know, as we say in the we the people of India in the preamble of the Constitution, this people is no more heterogeneous. This people is getting more homogeneous. And so in the case of India, you know, the authentic people is actually created on the grounds of religion. You know, unlike the multi-caste, multi-linguistic, multi-religious kind of the constitutive people that India used to have. So I think this construction of the people itself is a very interesting kind of a populist act which the populist politician continuously do, and here the media actually plays a lot of role, you know, and social media certainly in today's context. Thank you.
Absolutely, sir. Now, actually, madam's answer and the context of obedience reminds me of Nietzsche and his conception of herd mentality. And that is something I think we can always associate with populism, that how obedience, or rather the tendency to be or want to be part of the majority, motivates us to always be a part of the crowd or the herd. And yeah, so with this I think we can end the panel discussion and move on to the question answer session. So I'd request if students and also faculties and whoever is present here to ask questions. Yeah. The mic is, I think, on the table.
Hello, am I audible? Okay, so in the film, I noticed that the main character, Dr. Ashok Gupta, like many of the people were accusing him of being non-religious, like as if it's something very evil. So I have two questions regarding this. First of all, was Dr. Ashok Gupta really a non-religious person? And secondly, if so, why is like the concept of being non-religious or being atheist is looked down upon in the society?
I think we can gather a couple of questions and then... and also, is this question of yours directed to any particular panelist or anybody could answer?
Anybody can answer.
All right. If we can get a few more questions.
But it's better to have actually one-to-ones.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise the question gets lost.
All right, so I think we can respond first.
So yeah, I think it's a very good question. In fact, you know, I guess, you know, the science rationality versus superstitious belief, I think that's a very simplistic, binary, oppositional, you know, kind of a framework that Ray portrayed. And Ashok Gupta, by his own admission, is not atheistic, because he suggests in the film, in the dais, in the program, that he is a Hindu, but he's non-religious, and he says that he doesn't actually go to the temple just like you go, in the sense that you go, but he goes there. In fact, he visits this temple once, you know, while seeing how the Charanamrita is getting distributed. But he is opposed to certain customs and rituals of the Hindu religion. But he is born a Hindu, so he is not atheistic. And I think it is partly to do with even with how Ray actually was as he was, you know. So a lot of Ray, you know, the relationship between Ray and Ray's wife Vijaya Roy, I think that has a even role to play, how Ashok Gupta was treating his wife. Even if you look at the discussion between Ashok Gupta and Soumitra Chatterjee and Ruma Go Thakurada, who was the wife, and you said that, you know, why do you actually always go to the kitchen, you know, come here and sit. So there is also a kind of an authoritarian, a slight docile authoritarian figure also there. In the question of gender, I think, you know, Ray didn't take the gender question here much clearly as he deals in some other films. But in this film, and then there is also another thing when Ruma Go Thakurada suggests that, you know, at one point of time I used to believe in religion. My father was like a conservative, and I learned all these things from my father. But I am now, your wishes is the same as my wish, and over the years I have, spent time with you, and now I have, realized that how a person can be honest even if he is non-religious. You see, so I guess that's the kind of an interesting part that he's making here. He is not atheist. He is certainly non-religious. Now, this is where this whole idea of his belief, his individual belief, is coming into conflict with this whole construction of the authentic people, because the mob here, which is if not a majority but a significant majority, they believe in certain superstitious beliefs. And they think that if you're a Hindu, then you have to be a practicing Hindu, which means that you have to go to temple and worship and follow certain rituals and customs. Now I think that's the conflict and tussle that is going on. Now I think this is a very simplistic portrayal, because a lot of scientists today in India, even not only in India but even from C.V. Raman's days, a lot of scientists, particularly from South, even in Bengal also, they actually believe in religion. They are very, 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 very dutiful religion. The Somnath, who is a ISRO scientist, he just has made a visit to the temple. The previous ISRO chairman, Sivan. So I don't think that in practice scientists actually are non-religious. But here, I think again the Ray's Brahmo thing, which is coming much to the play. His own character is also somehow portraying, and this has been going on in Ray's last films, even in Shaka Proshaka, where Ray is very much characterized as the honest father figure who is in bed, who is ill. Then Agontuk, the Manmohan Mitra's character, is very much Ray's own. In fact, Ray suggests to Utpal Datta that my own confession, my own kind of an understanding about civilization and its crisis and all, you will be actually portraying it. So I think that's the director is coming out in the very flesh of the actor here.
Just one thing can I add? See, being religious does not mean that you go to temple every day, 2 times, thrice, etc., drinking those charanamrito, which is in this movie, which is contaminated, right, the holy water. So it is not being religious. Religious is being something like understanding that in all of us we have God, so we have to save that. So what Dr. Gupta, he wanted to do, he wanted to save people. And then he was not asking that to, to close the temple forever. He was just asking that to close the temple for the time being, stop distributing those holy water, which is as of now contaminated. For the time being, find out the errors, and then he will come back with all these things. So this is what I do believe, that it is, the kind of being a true human being, rather than somebody is religious vis-a-vis not religious. So this is my viewpoint.
And also, if you remember, he makes this distinction between, religion belief on the one hand and health on the other hand. He says that it is not a matter of question of religion, it's a matter of health. And these are two different things. You don't confuse it.
Okay, if I just may say one thing about that even religion or being religious, there is an element of performance, that you have to perform being religious. Even doesn't matter how much you believe in God or not, if you do not perform it in through a certain format, people will not consider you religious as such. Okay, and if are there any other questions? Any other questions from the students? Any question from the faculty members?
Okay, good evening everybody. My question is to Anita madam. Anita madam, Rita madam. Ma'am, you said that we need to create subgroups in order to create more consciousness. But if I go by the definition of majoritarianism, it's like something that the majority in a community believes and everybody follows. Yes, so when we are creating a subgroup, in that subgroup also, why we are creating the subgroup? We are creating the subgroup because that group of people follow a particular idea. So do you think that when we are creating subgroups also, or rather we are creating an opposition group, as in the movie they showed that one who were believing in keeping the temple open, the other who were not believing. So in both cases, the both group are following some kind of majoritarian ideologies that is followed by the majority of the particular group. And is it because of the concept of impression management that we try to follow majoritarianism in general, or something that is followed? That is my question. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for the question. Ma'am, what I actually meant, maybe hurriedly, like I was saying of all this, that actually the subgroups here, what you rightly mentioned, that in this movie there was two groups in favor of this and not in favor of that, right? So as you said, but then what I meant to say that when we have, because in basically in reality what we have that like one or two people are saying something and then addressing the majority, so like the way, right? So three of us, four of us are saying something and the majority they are accepting the thing, rather than if we have this small groups and then taking their opinion and coming to the like weighing their opinion, like what are the pros and cons of the particular decision. So that's what I meant by this small group. Maybe subgroups may not be the right word, maybe the dividing this entire group into small groups and then giving them this the idea where we want to brainstorm, so that the majoritarianism, this thought or this concept doesn't evolve much. Like we are getting ideas from the different groups, and then coming to a consensus. Before coming to a consensus, we are weighing what are the pros and cons of the different decision or their viewpoint, and then we come to together, if we come to a certain consensus, probably this is how we can reduce this the impact of majoritarianism. Because when there are three or four people, for example here, we are addressing this the entire the student community and faculty members. So many of us, when we are saying something, when we are playing the major role, right? So many people there in the audience, they somehow feeling a bit hesitant to go against what they are saying. So why should I go against that? So in spite of having this structure, if we have this different small groups taking their opinion and weighing their consideration or viewpoints, and then coming to coming to consensus, and if not consensus in real life, at least having certain different perspectives, so that we are not going to stick to a one or two perspective, right? We are going to understand many other perspective as well. Probably that was my intention of saying these things, right? Thank you.
So that is basically a cure, or rather not a cure particularly, a measure to undertake in order to somewhat reduce the impact of majoritarianism, that to get the opinion from every subgroup and understand what it should truly lead to.
So when we have the smaller groups, people will, the role of the emergence of this devil's advocate would be more, like the frequent, compared to when we are addressing this one or two people addressing the large community and people are saying something. So that one person, see, because when I am there in the 5 individual group, 5 members group, right? So it is easy for me to say that, see, I am against this group decision. Vis-a-vis when I'm a person and a member of 200 groups. So it is weird for me to come up with something which is, I'm going against the group decision. So that's I wanted to say, yeah.
Thank you, madam. Any other? Okay, sir, wanted to ask.
Here to add, I think even this whole subgroups thing is also there in the program itself, where you have a narrative which is the mob, but at the same time you have a counter narrative of a very different kinds of articulated young men and women of the theatre group of Ronen, who are suggesting that we need to also hear Ashok Gupta, because we are here to listen to him. So I guess that's the thing. So once so so it's the house was divided in a way, but then these are two different groups, and the subgroup is within the larger group. But then that particular group, if it, as you are saying, that even in 200, a lot of people will be shy to actually comment or express their opinion. Conformity will be more. And in the Ibsen's case, in the Ibsen, this whole sheepish mentality, which is the hard mentality of Nietzsche, I think that was already there, and Ibsen was basically suggesting that, which was also here in Ganashatru.
Yeah, in Ibsen's play, I think it was largely a portrayal of the Ubermensch.
That's right. Yeah.
That the Ashok Gupta's character is basically the Superman who will fight against the majority.
That's right.
Yeah. I think there is another question.
Hello. So, my question is not directed to any particular panelist, but before I go to the question, I would like to thank all the panelists for enlightening us with a very commendable discussion, and the discussion was quite a lively one. My question is, if we refer to Ganashatru, or if we are looking at the movie, we see that there is majoritarianism at work throughout the movie. Because we are seeing that Dr. Gupta is trying to advance his case with the help of majoritarianism. At the same time, we are seeing that the chairman of the municipality, who is pitted against Dr. Gupta, he is also trying to advance his case with the help of majoritarianism. So we are somewhere seeing two kinds of majoritarianism at play. One is good, quote unquote, and the other is a bad kind of majoritarianism. So is there any kind of good or bad majoritarianism at all? Because again, if I'm coming back to democracy, democracy is necessarily premised on the basis of majority rule. So if I'm commending democracy as an ideal form of government which is based on democracy, majority rule, and at the same time I'm also talking of the perils of too much of majority. So if any of the speakers would like to shed light on this.
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. In fact, I think this is a question which Professor Chatterjee was trying to deal with while he was responding to his own first question, that how do you actually frame and theorize majoritarianism? Because at the end of the day, democracy is a rule of the majority. Now, what Dr. Gupta was in the film was doing, of course, he was trying to gain support from Manoj Mitra, the character who was the president of the 3 cooperatives, also the media backing and all. But then any kind of scientific truth has to be, if you need to establish that fact and that truth, you need a certain kind of a support from your society. And if you look at Galileo's time, also this has actually happened. When he was challenging the whole church's idea about how our solar system works. So that actually happens, and in politics, this kind of tussle between a certain way of thinking and certain belief system will be there. Now, whether it's a good or bad, that is a normative judgment. Now, that's precisely a normative judgment, because a lot of people will say that, those who are religious believers and those believe in the superstitious beliefs are actually, they think that they are doing this for the good. And this whole idea of this whole Bhargava suggesting that because it has Ganga Jal and this has Tulsi Pata, because it's Tulsi Pata, it can't be, it's absolutely pure, it can't be impure, it can't have any bacteria and viruses, and hundreds of years Indians have lived like this. So instead of, I will say, instead of the good or bad, I think what is interesting is that whether a majoritarianism is exploitative, whether majoritarianism is oppressive, versus whether a majoritarianism is welfareist or beneficial. Now, one difference in the theory of populism and majoritarianism is that to differentiate between the left and the right-wing kind of majoritarianism, where the right-wing majoritarianism is anti-immigrant and in a way more oppressive, with a lot of superstitious beliefs that these are not part of the authentic community, authentic people, and they are taking our jobs and all. The left-wing majoritarianism is more deals with welfareism, distribution, redistribution, and that. So I think these are policy-related questions instead of the good and the bad, because that's become some more simplistic. But what does good or bad mean actually? It is very, very relative.
Can I add something over here? Ma'am, you said that, you rightly mentioned that both are trying to, spread these things, whether in favor or not in favor. So I would rather say both the party, they are having certain power. I'm just trying to concentrate on the power, because here this entire movie is based on the power from a different perspective. So Dr. Gupta having this power of the credibility, what we call in our field, that is an expert power. So he had the credibility and he wanted to do something for the benefit, right? So-called, or the way we are interpreting it. And another person having the power as well, but he is actually using more of a personal power. So he is actually using this, his positional power, in order to gain certain personal thing, because as this temple is going to get closed, there are a lot of revenues and etc., other donation, everything, that particular will think, that will not benefit them. So it is about that, how am I may be having certain power. That is not a wrong thing, because power is important, because we all know there is a, McClellan's theory, this need for power and all, other theories, other needs are also there. But how am I using this power? Am I using this power for my personal benefit or for the social benefit, social power? So that is very important. I think there is a constant conflict between these things. So one person is using his personal power for the benefit of his or her own. Another person is being a very credible person, being a very good doctor, because he was there in Kolkata as well, practicing there in Kolkata, and those days it was very, very promising. He had a lot of, promising career as well. So then he is using his credibility, expert power, for the benefit of the society. So that is the conflict, what is shown in the movie. Thank you.
Ultimately, it is a struggle between, truly radical scientific mind versus, conservative, unscientific, and, some sort of clever mind. So Dr. Gupta is on the one side. His mind is truly scientific, truly radical, as opposed to the public psyche, which does not care about, scientism, does not care about what is good, what is bad. Dr. Gupta shows personal integrity, strong character. But on the other hand, as we know, majoritarianism, what we are calling it, majoritarianism does not really care about it. It goes with populism. Jhanker koi jedike ami sedike. That is what majoritarianism has turned out to be. So it is, in a sense, there is another power struggle. A struggle, I would say, the struggle of populist power, the struggle between populist power and one individual scientific radical mind. That is a power struggle. And obviously that individual loses the battle. So as we see in our everyday life, but fortunately or unfortunately, the film ends with a positive note. Dr. Gupta regains everything. His views are published. His views get to the public. So I don't know all about it, but probably, if I may say so, that is also due to populist demand. Maybe or may not be.
So that's where the part, you have to be populist in a way, because in order to win the argument, so even you need to have certain kind of support. So here, Dr. Gupta doesn't give in to the social ostracism that he initially faced, and backed up by another segment of a public who are backing Dr. Gupta and say, Dr. Gupta Zindabad. And I think this is, and when Ruma Gautarkar comes from the kitchen and says that who are these people? And he can't, he can't also believe his own ears that, this is something, in a context where his daughter loses her job and daughter says that she will manage by doing some tutoring, and the doctor loses his job and he will have to do now private practice, but not sure whether, patients will come to him, and that's the kind of a, sordid tale. And this is where, again, another kind of a populist pressure is coming up. Again, that's where counter narrative is coming up. So I guess you need to win the argument. To win the argument, you need to also get consent from the significant sections of the people, if not the majority, but at least a significant section of the people. And in a democracy, that's the argument is being won, at least for the time being, where you have a lot of significant support.
Thank you so much, everyone. I think we began largely with a discussion of majoritarianism, but also we got the opportunity of discussing populism at length. So we covered two areas broadly. Anyway, so we can end the panel discussion and the question answer session with this, and I'll request Professor Anindita, HOD Psychology Department, to provide the vote of thanks.
A very good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Department of Psychology, Sociology, Political Science, I am glad to be standing here to express my vote of thanks. A special thanks to Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, Registrar Sir, and Pro Vice Chancellor Sir for their constant support and guidance. Thanks to our guest speakers for accepting our invitation and for being here with us today. Your discussions have truly encouraged us and enriched us. Thank you to the organizing committee, all the faculties of Department of Psychology, Sociology and Political Science. Thank you Mass Communication Department for their constant media support. And last but not the least, thank you my dear students for being an amazing audience. Thank you so much. Take care.